Welcome, travelers of time and myth, to the eternal manuscript. Have you ever wondered how a narrow strip of land between mountains and sea could become the cradle of a civilization that would forever transform the destiny of the Mediterranean? What force drove a people to master the waves when others feared being lost on the horizon? Today, I invite you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and travel with me to the shores of the Levant, where more than 3,500 years ago, the cities of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos wrote the first pages of a story that still resonates in our civilization, written in purple and salt. I am your guide on this nocturnal journey, and this story will help you understand how the audacity of a few can illuminate the path for many, while your mind finds the serenity it deserves. The days were around 1500 BC, when the sun of the eastern Mediterranean bathed the shores of what we know today as Lebanon in golden light. Between the mountain ranges of Mount Lebanon and the blue waters of the sea, cities rose that seemed to have been placed there by the gods themselves. Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos were not mere settlements. They were ports where the dreams of adventurers, the ambitions of merchants, and the secrets of artisans who worked precious materials with expert hands converged. These city-states, independent of one another but united by a common culture, shared a characteristic that made them unique. Their gaze was always fixed on the sea horizon, on that point where the sky kisses the waters, and where other peoples saw the end of the known world. The Phoenicians, as the Greeks would later call them, saw instead the beginning of infinite possibilities. Geography was both a blessing and a challenge for this extraordinary people. The narrow coastal strip where they established their cities lacked the vast, fertile plains that allowed other empires to cultivate their food in abundance. The mountains of Lebanon, though majestic and covered in legendary cedars, limited expansion inland where other powerful peoples controlled the land routes. It was this apparent limitation that forged the Phoenician character and defined their destiny. If the land denied them space, the sea would offer them a world without borders. Thus, between the rock and the salt water, a culture was born that learned to read the stars, interpret the winds, and build ships that could defy the storms. Byblos, the oldest of these cities, was already a prosperous port long before the second millennium BC. Its very name evokes the mystery of knowledge, for from its name, the word Bible, the book of books, is derived. From its docks, ships departed laden with cedar wood, that sacred tree whose fragrance and durability were coveted by the pharaohs of Egypt, who used it to build their temples and funerary ships. Trade with Egypt brought not only wealth to Byblos, but also knowledge. Phoenician scribes studied Egyptian hieroglyphs and Mesopotamian cuneiform, planting the seeds of what would become their most enduring gift to humanity. The streets of Byblos resonated with languages from distant lands, and in its workshops, ivory, gold, and precious gems were crafted with a skill that astonished those who came from every corner of the known world. While Byblos shone as a center of cultural exchange, Tyre emerged as the most dazzling jewel of the Phoenician world. Situated on a rocky island a short distance from the coast, Tyre seemed invulnerable, protected by the sea that surrounded it like a natural moat. Its inhabitants developed a unique ability to utilize every inch of available land, constructing multi-story buildings that reached for the sky, anticipating by millennia what would become modern high-rise cities. But Tyre's true treasure lay not in its buildings, but in a small mollusk that inhabited the nearby waters, the murex. From this marine snail, they extracted a purple dye so intense, so long-lasting, and so difficult to obtain that it would become the symbol of imperial and royal power. Thousands of these mollusks were needed to dye a single toga, and the extraction process was so laborious and malodorous that the workshops were located outside the city. However, the end result was worth any sacrifice. Tyrian purple became the most coveted color in the ancient world, and its trade filled the city's coffers with unimaginable riches. Sidon, for its part, was distinguished by the supreme quality of its glass artisans. In its furnaces, objects of a beauty and transparency that seemed magical were created. Cups, vases, amulets, and blown glass jewelry that captured the sunlight in ways never before seen. The Sidonians jealously guarded the secrets of their craft, passing down from master to apprentice the techniques that transformed ordinary sand into precious glass. Their creations were exported to the palaces of Assyria, the courts of Egypt, and later to the cities of Greece, carrying with them not only beauty, but also the reputation of a people capable of transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. This mastery of the arts of fire and chemistry would be only the prelude to even greater innovations that this people had in store for the world. Phoenician religion wove a complex tapestry of deities that reflected this people's intimate relationship with the sea and trade. Baal, the god of storms and fertility, reigned in the Phoenician pantheon with absolute power over the elements that sailors both loved and feared. Asherah, the mother goddess, represented life and continuity, while Melkart, the patron god of Tyre, was venerated as the patron of sailors and merchants. The Phoenician temples, built on the highest points of each city, served not only as places of worship, but also as spiritual beacons guiding ships back to port. In these sacred spaces, sacrifices and offerings were performed, rituals intended to secure divine favor on sea voyages and in commercial ventures. The Phoenicians carried their gods with them wherever they traveled, establishing sanctuaries in each colony they founded, thus creating a spiritual network that connected their settlements scattered throughout the Mediterranean. The social structure of Phoenician cities reflected the importance of trade in their civilization. At the top were the kings, although their power was limited compared to that of the monarchs of other empires, as they had to share decision-making with councils of elders and powerful merchants. Merchant families formed an aristocracy based not on birth, but on accumulated wealth and established commercial connections. Skilled artisans held a place of respect in society, for it was from their hands that the products that made their cities famous came. Sailors, those brave men who braved the unknown, were celebrated as heroes when they returned successfully from their expeditions, bringing back tales of distant lands and exotic treasures. This social structure, more fluid and meritocratic than that of other contemporary civilizations, allowed for a degree of social mobility based on commercial success and individual skill. Phoenician ships were masterpieces of naval engineering that combined robustness with speed. Built with the legendary cedar wood of Lebanon, these vessels featured curved hulls that cut through the waves efficiently, square sails that harnessed the Mediterranean winds, and oars that allowed for precise maneuvering when conditions demanded it. The Phoenicians developed two main types of vessels: round, heavy ships for transporting goods, capable of carrying large loads of pottery, metals and manufactured products, and long, streamlined galleys for swift voyages and, when necessary, for warfare. The reinforced keels of their ships allowed them to venture into deeper and stormier waters than other navigators of their time, while their knowledge of celestial navigation gave them the confidence to lose sight of the coast and venture into the open sea. Each ship was blessed before setting sail, painted with protective eyes on the prow, so it could see its way through the waters, and carried sacred amulets that invoked the protection of the sea gods. Thus were born the cities that would change the course of Mediterranean history. Between mountains that touched the clouds and a sea that promised endless horizons, the Phoenicians forged their identity as a people of traders and seafarers. Their legacy was just beginning to be written on these shores of the Levant, but they already carried within them that spark of audacity that would take them to the farthest reaches of the known world. Close your eyes now, time traveler, and let the sound of the waves against the docks of Tyre lull you to sleep, while the stars that guided the ancient navigators shine for you as well on this nighttime journey into the past. We continue our journey across the waters of the ancient Mediterranean. Time traveler, in this moment of your rest, I invite you to immerse yourself in the best-kept secrets of the Phoenician civilization, the mystery of imperial purple, and the maritime routes that wove the first global trade network of the ancient world. Take a deep breath, relax, and let yourself be carried away by the gentle rhythm of the waves as we explore together how a simple marine mollusk and the audacity of a few navigators transformed the destiny of the Mediterranean. Let me guide you through the holds of merchant ships, through the workshops where the most coveted color of antiquity was created, and along the secret routes that connected civilizations separated by turbulent seas. Tyrian purple was not merely a color, it was a symbol of absolute power, a visual manifestation of earthly divinity, and a treasure more valuable than gold itself. The process for obtaining this dye was so complex and laborious that only the most patient and dedicated minds could master it. In the crystal-clear waters surrounding Tyre and other Phoenician cities lived a small gastropod mollusk called a murex, the unwitting bearer of an age-old secret. Phoenician divers descended into the ocean depths to collect these snails one by one, risking their lives amidst the currents and dangers of the sea. Each murex contained just a few drops of a colorless liquid that, when exposed to sunlight and air, underwent an almost magical transformation, changing from greenish yellow to a deep, brilliant purple. Approximately 12,000 mollusks were needed to obtain a mere 1.5 grams of pure dye, which explains why this color became the most exclusive and expensive in the ancient world. The dye workshops in Tyre were places where ancient chemistry blended with art and family tradition. The entire process took weeks and filled the air with such a pungent and unpleasant odor that these facilities had to be located outside the city, far from homes and temples. Master dyers guarded their secrets with absolute secrecy, passing them on only to their sons and most trusted apprentices. First, the collected murex shells were placed in large stone vats where the hypobranchial gland, the source of the precious liquid, was extracted. This fluid was then mixed with salt and left to ferment for days under the Mediterranean sun, constantly stirred to achieve the exact desired hue. The masters knew that slight variations in fermentation time, temperature, or salt ratio could produce different shades of purple, from purplish red to deep blue. This chemical mastery, passed down through generations, made the Phoenicians the most respected alchemists of their time. Fabrics dyed with Tyrian purple became objects of supreme desire for kings, emperors, and high priests throughout the Mediterranean civilizations. Egyptian pharaohs wrapped their mummified bodies in purple dyed linen, believing that this sacred color would accompany them on their journey to the afterlife. Persian kings wore purple, robes as a symbol of their divine authority over the vast Achaemenid Empire. Later, Roman emperors decreed that only they could wear the imperial purple toga, punishing with death any citizen who dared to usurp this privilege. Every meter of purple cloth that left the Phoenician workshops carried with it not just a color, but a declaration of power, wealth, and a connection to the divine. Phoenician merchants fully understood the psychological value of their product. They weren't simply selling dye, they were selling status, authority, and the promise of transcendence. But purple was just one of the many wonders that Phoenician ships carried across the Mediterranean. Phoenician trade routes stretched like an invisible web connecting the far reaches of the known world. From Lebanon, ships departed laden with cedar wood, blown glass, gold and silver jewelry, carved ivory, bronze and iron weapons, and of course the coveted purple fabrics. These ships sailed to Cyprus, where they traded their goods for copper from the local mines. They continued on to Crete and the Aegean Islands, establishing trading posts in strategic ports. They arrived in Egypt with their holds full of timber and manufactured goods, returning with papyrus, gold, spices, and grain. They traveled north to the coasts of Asia Minor, where they traded with the Hittites and later with the Greeks. Each voyage was a risky undertaking that combined trade, diplomacy, and adventure. Phoenician navigation reached levels of sophistication that would not be equaled for centuries. While other peoples sailed only by day and always kept the coast in sight, the Phoenicians learned to read the stars as if they were a celestial map written especially for them. The North Star, which they called the Phoenician Star in their honor, became their constant guide during the nights at sea. They observed ocean currents, studied bird migration patterns, and interpreted the color of the water and the shape of the clouds to predict storms. They developed an empirical understanding of the Mediterranean's seasonal winds. They knew when the Etesius would blow from the north, facilitating travel south, and when westerly winds would allow the return home. This knowledge wasn't written on parchment. It lived in the memories of experienced captains who passed it down orally to new generations of navigators during long voyages under the starry sky. If you enjoy this nighttime journey through Phoenician history, I invite you to subscribe to the Eternal Manuscript. Here you'll find more stories to accompany you at night, tales that connect you with the wisdom of the past as you find the serenity your mind needs. Don't forget to turn on notifications so that each new journey reaches you like a whisper from time. Phoenician trading posts in foreign ports functioned as embassies, warehouses, and cultural centers simultaneously. In these enclaves, Phoenician traders lived for months or even years, learning the local languages, studying the customs of each people, and establishing relationships of trust that transcended generations. They were not simply merchants who arrived, sold, and departed. They were diplomats of trade who understood that lasting business was built on mutual respect and shared benefit. They brought news from distant lands, introduced new technologies and products, and served as cultural bridges between civilizations that otherwise would never have had contact. In these cosmopolitan spaces, a Phoenician trader might negotiate with an Egyptian nobleman in the morning, a Greek craftsman at midday, and a Cretan captain in the afternoon, each conversation weaving another thread into the complex web of Mediterranean trade. The Phoenicians did not only trade tangible goods, they also exchanged knowledge, techniques, and culture. On their travels, they observed how other peoples worked metals, cultivated their fields, and organized their cities. They adopted the best practices of each civilization, adapting them to their own needs. They learned advanced metallurgy from the Hittites, architectural techniques from the Egyptians, and artistic traditions from the Cretans. This openness to foreign knowledge, combined with their own innovation, made them a syncretic civilization that absorbed the best of each culture without losing its fundamental identity. When the Greeks began to develop their own maritime tradition, it was the Phoenicians who taught them the secrets of deep-sea navigation and long-distance trade. Religion also traveled in the holds of Phoenician ships. Each trading post included a small shrine dedicated to the patron deities, especially Melkart, the seafaring god of Tyre. These temples served as places of thanksgiving after successful voyages and of supplication before embarking on new journeys. Phoenician sailors were deeply religious, aware that their lives depended on forces they could not fully control. They offered sacrifices before setting sail, carried protective amulets during their voyages, and dedicated a portion of their earnings to the temples upon their safe return. This devotion was not mere superstition. It was a recognition of the humility required in the face of the vastness of the sea and the mysteries of fate. The Phoenician systems of weights and measures were gradually standardized throughout the Mediterranean, facilitating trade between different peoples. They developed early forms of accounting, recording their transactions on clay tablets and later on papyrus. Although they did not invent minted coins, they used ingots of precious metals of standard weight that served as a reliable medium of exchange. This commercial infrastructure, combined with their reputation for honesty in business, made Phoenician merchants welcome in every port in the Mediterranean. Their word was their bond, and breaking a trade agreement was considered not only a crime against the trading partner, but also an offense against the gods who protected commerce. Thus, the Phoenicians wove the first truly global trade network of the ancient world. With purple in their holds and stars as their guides, they connected east with west, north with south, creating a network of exchange that transcended political borders and cultural differences. Every wave that now caresses your consciousness carries with it the echo of those ancient navigators, and every deep breath connects you to the eternal rhythm of the sea they mastered. Rest now, time traveler, as the purple sails of Phoenician ships sail also in your dreams. Welcome once more to this serene journey across the waters of time, dear traveler. In this moment of your rest, when your mind seeks peace and your spirit yearns for connection with ancestral wisdom, I invite you to discover the most transcendent gift the Phoenicians bequeathed to humanity. Close your eyes gently, breathe calmly, and let your breath align with the unhurried rhythm of these words. Today we will explore together how 22 simple symbols forever transformed the way humanity preserves its thoughts, and how ships laden with dreams founded cities that would become empires. Let me guide you to the western horizon, where Phoenician colonies sowed seeds of civilization that would flourish for millennia. In the bustling streets of Byblos and Tyre, amidst the bustle of merchants and the rhythmic hum of workshops, a quiet revolution was brewing that would change the destiny of humankind. The Phoenician scribes, those dedicated men who recorded commercial transactions and diplomatic treaties, faced a monumental challenge every day. The existing writing systems were extraordinarily complex. Egyptian hieroglyphs required knowledge of hundreds of symbols, each representing either entire words or abstract concepts. Mesopotamian cuneiform demanded mastery of more than 600 different signs, each painstakingly etched onto clay tablets with reed styluses. These systems kept the knowledge of writing as the privilege of an educated elite for years, limiting the spread of knowledge and greatly hindering international trade. The Phoenicians, always pragmatic and efficiency-oriented, understood that they needed something radically different, a system that any merchant could learn in weeks, not years. Thus, the Phoenician alphabet was born, probably between the 13th and 11th centuries BC, an innovation so elegant in its simplicity that its genius is almost invisible. Instead of representing entire words or complex syllables, the Phoenician scribes had a revolutionary idea. Each sign would represent a single consonant sound in their language. 22 letters, just 22 simple symbols, were enough to transcribe any word, any thought, any idea that could be expressed in the Phoenician language. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. The names of these letters have been preserved through millennia, still resonating in our modern alphabet. They did not include written vowels because in Semitic languages, consonants carry the fundamental meaning of words, while vowels are inferred from context. This system, stripped of all unnecessary ornamentation, perfectly reflected the Phoenician spirit. Functional, efficient, and focused on practical results. The Phoenician alphabet spread throughout the Mediterranean as rapidly as their merchant ships. Every Phoenician trading post became a center for the dissemination of the alphabet, and every recorded transaction was a demonstration of the power of this system. The Greeks, those eternal students eager for knowledge, adopted the Phoenician alphabet around the 8th century BC, adapting it to their own language with one crucial modification. They added symbols for vowels, creating the first complete alphabet in history. From the Greeks, it passed to the Etruscans, from the Etruscans to the Romans, and from Rome to the entire Western world. Every letter you write or read right now, every word that forms part of your conscious thought, descends directly from those 22 simple symbols that Phoenician traders inscribed on papyrus more than 3,000 years ago. This is perhaps the most perfect example of how a practical innovation, born of commercial necessity, can become the very foundation of civilization. While the alphabet revolutionized communication, Phoenician ships sailed farther and farther west, seeking new markets and resources. Phoenician colonies began to spring up all over the Mediterranean like flowers in a marine garden. These were not mere temporary trading posts. They were carefully planned cities, populated by entire families who brought with them the culture, religion, and knowledge of their mother cities. Each colony was established according to precise strategic criteria: a protected natural harbor, access to fresh water, proximity to valuable resources, and the ability to defend itself against hostile populations. The founders performed elaborate religious ceremonies before establishing each new city, consulting the gods and carrying sacred fire from the temples of Tyre or Sidon to ignite the flames of the new sanctuaries. This ritual continuity created an unbreakable spiritual bond between the metropolis and its scattered colonies. Carthage, whose name means new city in Phoenician, was traditionally founded in 814 BC on the coast of North Africa. Legend attributes its founding to Princess Dido, also called Elissa, who fled Tyre after the death of her husband at the hands of her own brother, King Pygmalion. This story, preserved by the Roman poet Virgil centuries later, tells how Dido negotiated with local leaders to purchase as much land as could be covered by an ox hide. With legendary cunning, she cut the hide into very thin strips, which she then spread out in a large circle, thus demarcating the territory for her new city. Beyond the legend, the truth is that Carthage grew rapidly, surpassing its mother city in power and wealth. Its port was an engineering marvel, with circular docks that could accommodate more than 220 ships simultaneously. Its walls were so imposing that they defied the most powerful armies of the time. Carthage became the heir to the Phoenician legacy, dominating Western Mediterranean trade for centuries. At the western edge of the known world, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Phoenicians established Gadir, modern-day Cadiz, on the Iberian Peninsula. Founded probably around 1100 BC, Gadir became the Phoenician gateway to the Atlantic and the mineral riches of Iberia. From this remote colony, the Phoenicians traded with the local populations, obtaining silver from the mines of Tartessos, tin from the distant British Isles, and amber from the coasts of northern Europe. Gadir housed a temple dedicated to Melkart, so magnificent that sailors from all over the western Mediterranean made pilgrimages there to pay homage to the protector god of the seas. The columns of this temple recorded the exploits of the most daring navigators, creating a living archive of Phoenician explorations into the unknown. Some ancient historians suggest that Phoenician expeditions circumnavigated all of Africa. Although this claim remains debated, it stands as a testament to Phoenician audacity. Other colonies flourished in Sicily, where Panormo, modern-day Palermo, and Motia became thriving trading centers. In Sardinia, they established Caralis and Nora, from where they controlled the routes to the Italian peninsula. In Malta, they founded settlements that took advantage of the island's strategic position in the heart of the Mediterranean. Each of these colonies maintained its Phoenician identity while adapting its practices to local realities. They traded with the native populations, sometimes peacefully, sometimes through marriage alliances, gradually integrating themselves into the social fabric of each region. The Phoenician colonists did not impose their culture by force. They shared it through exchange, demonstration, and mutual benefit. Religion traveled at the heart of every Phoenician colony. Temples dedicated to Baal, Tanit, Melkart, and Astarte were erected in prominent locations in each new city. Tanit, the protective mother goddess, acquired special importance in Carthage, where her cult reached monumental proportions. Phoenician priests preserved ancestral rituals, maintaining the spiritual connection with the mother cities despite the distances and the passage of generations. Religious festivals synchronized the colonies with the sacred Phoenician calendar, creating a sense of cultural unity that transcended political boundaries. However, the Phoenicians also showed openness to local deities, often identifying correspondences between their gods and those of other peoples, thus facilitating religious coexistence. Phoenician agricultural, architectural, and metallurgical techniques spread throughout the Western Mediterranean thanks to these colonies. The Iberian peoples learned new methods of metal smelting, the Sardinians adopted shipbuilding techniques, and the Sicilians incorporated Eastern agricultural practices. This technological and cultural exchange gradually transformed the societies of the Western Mediterranean, raising their level of development and connecting them with the Eastern world. The Phoenician colonies functioned as practical schools of civilization, where theory and practice merged in the crucible of trade and daily life. In this way, the Phoenicians wove their colonial network, extending their culture from the Levant to the Atlantic. With the alphabet, they democratized written knowledge. With their colonies, they sowed the seeds of civilization in distant lands, and with their commercial spirit, they built bridges between peoples who would otherwise have remained isolated. Rest now, time traveler, as the letters of the Phoenician alphabet dance gently in your consciousness, and the sails of the colonizing ships also ply the tranquil seas of your dreams. The Phoenician legacy accompanies you in every word you read, in every thought you write. Together, we have reached the end of this nighttime journey across the waters of Phoenician history. Dear time traveler, in this final chapter of our journey, as your breath deepens and your mind finds the serenity of well-deserved rest, I invite you to contemplate how, even in decline, there is greatness, and how the legacy of a people can transcend its own physical existence. Breathe calmly, release the day's tensions, and join me in this final reflection on how the Phoenicians, though they disappeared as a political entity, never truly ceased to exist. Their spirit lives on in every letter we write, in every ship that sails the seas, in every commercial transaction that connects distant cultures. Prepare to close this cycle with the serenity of one who understands that nothing truly valuable is ever lost. The destinies of Carthage and Rome were intertwined long before the two cities clashed on the battlefield. During the 3rd century BC, these two emerging Mediterranean powers regarded each other with a mixture of respect, admiration, and growing rivalry. Rome, that city of shepherds turned conqueror of Italy, looked with envy upon Carthage's maritime dominance and its control over the rich western trade routes. Carthage, proud heir to the Phoenician legacy, saw in Rome a growing threat to its traditional hegemony over the Western Mediterranean. What began as trade tensions and territorial disputes in Sicily would transform into a series of conflicts that historians would call the Punic Wars, a name derived from the Latin word for Phoenician. These wars, which raged intermittently for more than a century, would decide not only the fate of two cities, but the entire future of the Mediterranean world. The First Punic War erupted in 260 BC and dragged on for 23 grueling years. Rome, traditionally a land power, had to transform itself into a naval power to face Carthage on its own turf. With characteristic determination, the Romans captured a stranded Carthaginian ship, meticulously studied it, and built an entire fleet by copying its design. They added an innovation of their own, the corvus, a gangplank with a hook that allowed them to turn naval battles into infantry engagements. their true specialty. Carthage lost this first war, and with it Sicily, its most prized possession. The humiliating peace that followed included massive indemnities that drained the Carthaginian treasury. However, far from breaking the Punic spirit, this defeat ignited a desire for revenge in Carthage. On the shores of Hispania, the Barca family began to forge a new empire that would restore Carthage to its lost glory. Hannibal Barca, whose name means grace of Baal, would become Rome's nightmare for 16 long years. The son of General Hamilcar Barca, Hannibal had sworn eternal hatred for Rome before the altars of the Carthaginian gods since childhood. In 218 BC, this military genius embarked on one of the most audacious feats in history, crossing the Alps with an army of nearly 40,000 men and 37 war elephants to invade Italy from the north, where no one expected him. The mountains exacted a terrible toll. Thousands died from the cold, hunger, and avalanches, but Hannibal reached the plains of northern Italy with enough forces to terrify Rome. For years he defeated Roman army after Roman army, annihilating entire legions at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and especially Cannae, where he executed a double envelopment maneuver that generals still study today. Rome trembled. Its allies began to desert, but the city never surrendered. The Romans, demonstrating almost superhuman tenacity, learned from their defeats and adopted a strategy of attrition that finally wore Hannibal down. The third and final Punic War began in 149 BC, when Rome decided that Carthage, although weakened and stripped of its empire, still represented a threat that had to be eliminated once and for all. Senator Cato the Elder ended every one of his speeches, regardless of the subject, with the same obsessive phrase, "Carthage must be destroyed." Carthage defended itself with the desperation of those who know they are fighting for their very survival. For 3 years it withstood the Roman siege, its citizens battling on the walls even as hunger consumed them. Women cut their hair to make ropes for catapults. The elderly melted down their jewelry to forge weapons. But the tide of history was relentless. In 146 BC, the Roman general Scipio Aemilianus finally breached the walls. The battle raged on, house by house, street by street, for 6 hellish days. When the central citadel finally fell, barely 50,000 survivors remained of a population that had once exceeded 500,000. Scipio, according to legend, wept as he gazed upon the smoldering ruins, realizing that he had destroyed one of history's great civilizations. But herein lies the beautiful and mysterious paradox of the Phoenician legacy. Its political destruction did not mean its cultural annihilation. Rome, by conquering Carthage, became the unwitting heir to Phoenician knowledge. The Romans adopted and perfected Phoenician navigation techniques, shipbuilding methods, and trade routes. The alphabet Rome used, the basis of the one you and I use today, descended directly from Phoenician via Greek. Roman commercial practices, mercantile law, and systems of weights and measures in maritime trade all bore the Phoenician imprint. Even Roman religion absorbed elements of the Punic pantheon. The goddess Venus incorporated characteristics of Astarte, and purification rituals included elements of Phoenician origin. Rome built its empire on the foundations Carthage had laid in the western Mediterranean. Greece, for its part, had been transformed by the Phoenicians centuries before Rome emerged as a power. The Greek alphabet, that sublime vehicle that allowed Homer to sing the Iliad and the Odyssey, that enabled Plato to preserve the teachings of Socrates, that gave Aristotle the means to catalog human knowledge, was a direct adaptation of the Phoenician alphabet. The Greeks themselves acknowledged this debt. They attributed the introduction of writing to Cadmus, a legendary Phoenician prince who, according to myth, founded the city of Thebes. The Greek words for book, Byblos, and for the very letter of the alphabet derived from Phoenician terms. Greek navigators learned to read the stars from Phoenician captains. Their first warships copied Punic designs, and their colonies in the Mediterranean followed the model established by the Phoenicians centuries earlier. Tyrian purple remained the imperial color even after the fall of Carthage. Roman emperors coveted it as much as Persian kings, and Byzantine emperors considered it sacred, reserved exclusively for the imperial family. The secret of its manufacture, jealously guarded for centuries, remained alive in a few Phoenician cities that survived under Roman rule. Tyre continued to produce this legendary dye well into the Middle Ages, when the knowledge was finally lost, turning ancient purple fabrics into priceless archaeological treasures. Every time we see purple associated with royalty and power, we are witnessing a direct echo of those ancient Phoenician dyers who transformed mollusks into symbols of divinity. The Phoenician commercial spirit lives on in our modern civilization in ways we rarely recognize. The idea that trade can unite cultures rather than divide them, that mutually beneficial exchange triumphs over conflict, that practical innovation and adaptability are supreme virtues. All these are direct legacies of the Phoenician mindset. The great Venetian and Genoese merchants of the Middle Ages saw themselves as heirs to the Phoenician tradition. The Portuguese and Spanish explorers who opened the Atlantic routes followed mental maps originally drawn by Phoenician navigators. Even today, when global trade connects cultures in real time, when alphabetic writing enables universal communication, when we navigate guided by satellite stars that continue the tradition of celestial navigation, we are living in the world that the Phoenicians imagined and began to build more than 3,000 years ago. Thus ends our journey through the history of the Phoenicians, time traveler, but their story never truly ends. Every time you trace a letter on paper or screen, you are touching a legacy of 3 millennia. Every time trade crosses borders, building bridges between peoples, the Phoenician spirit smiles from eternity. Every time we gaze at the ocean horizon with curiosity rather than fear, we honor those ancient navigators who saw in the sea not a barrier, but a path. Rest now in peace, knowing that you are part of a vast story that connects the distant past with the unwritten future. Sleep with the serenity of ancient sailors who, after long voyages, finally found safe harbor. The stars that guided the Phoenicians shine upon you tonight as well, eternal and serene. May your rest be deep, may your dreams sail calm seas, and may you awaken renewed with the knowledge that you are heir to ancient civilizations. Good night, dear traveler, until our next meeting at the Eternal Manuscript.